Hi, Suman.
Hi Divya,
Good evening.
good evening. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect, perfect.
Awesome. Shall we get started and people will start coming in? Or do you want to wait?
Yeah, yeah, we can get started.
Okay. Sounds good. So, Suman, talk to us about networking is not for me. I have a personal, I think story with this, but do you want to talk about, why you set up and this framing of it, which is networking is not for me? Do you want to start?
Yeah. In fact, it's an interesting topic, and a lot of people, I think that way that networking is not for me. I will say that there was a time when even I used to think that way, and so yeah, it's a very common perception or common myth rather, which is why I thought I'll name it like that.
Absolutely. And I think, when I said I have a personal story, so I used to work in the consulting space, right, for many years, I think 11, 12 years. And, I was perfectly happy kind of in my little world, my little silo, meeting my clients, talking to them and doing all of it, right? And not really networking in the true sense, right?
Right.
And I never really, and now it's one of my biggest regrets, right, Suman? Now that we've started Mentza and, we're doing all of these things with Mentza, you just see the power it has, right? You see the unleashed potential that it has. And I feel like I missed out on 11 years worth of networking, right? And so that is one of the things that I wanted to share. Now I'll tell you why, and then you talked about why many people feel like networking is not for me, and I can start off with that, right? The fact that for me in my head it was effortful, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you put yourself out there, you need to go, you stand to face rejection also, right? And I'm sure that played a
Yes.
part in my decision in some ways, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so that's two. And I think three is that this feeling of forcing myself on other people,
Yeah.
right? I think that is another one for introverts and people a little bit who are on the, in the middle of that scale. That is always a problem, right? Suman.
Absolutely.
So I did want to talk about these three things, at least personally, that kind of, it wasn't a conscious decision, but it always held me back. It ensured that I didn't just go and do my thing, right? And like I said, I see the loss now.
Mm.
But do you want to kind of talk about some of these aspects as to are these the most common reasons, or is it just me of why?
Thanks for setting the context, Divya, and thanks for being so candid and honest. I think a lot of us have these kind of regrets, and this is one of those things that which can really be a game changer. Right. So let me take a step back and maybe talk about what is networking, right? Because networking as a term itself might mean a little, different things to different people. Essentially what networking is reaching out, right, to a bigger network, to a bigger group. It exposes us to new people, ideas, it gives us insights. In the process, what happens, we start developing connections, we start building information, and over time that gives us expertise, which is all the really which are all of them are really the pillars of personal power, right, which is the influencing without authority. And I think in today's day and age, that is absolutely critical because more and more people have to influence without authority. So that's basically the premise. That's basically the main reason why we need to network in the first place. You talked about a few misconceptions, so you're absolutely spot on, and these are things that really prevent us from going out and networking. So if I have to just kind of to talk about some of the high level ones.
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe some of us feel that networking should happen naturally, right? So we don't want to put in that extra effort. It also means that it makes us vulnerable, um, and we tend to justify to ourselves, right? We are very good as human beings. We are experts in justifying things to ourselves, right? Hey, I'm so good. People will come to me. I don't need to go to people. So that could be a justification which is going on in our head. So relationships should form naturally. The other thing, a lot of us, especially people who are more introverted, they normally have quite a few strong ties, and they think that I have some solid ties, maybe just a handful of people, but that's good enough, right? So I'm good with that. I don't need to expand that circle. So that could be another misconception. The third could be networking was also sometimes seen as, there's no point, it's a waste of time. You know what, I tried it, it didn't work. I've been to some sessions because somebody told me to, I did it, nothing happened. So I've just decided it's a waste of time, right? And these are all kind of mental blocks. And the fourth one is very interesting, which I think a lot of us feel have at least some of these notions that networks itself are selfish, they're inherently self-serving. So people find it a little uncomfortable. They find it almost phony, manipulative, which is why, and they have found that this is true across a whole bunch of people, right? Starting from professionals to executives to students. They just find it, and that's why we said it's not for me, right? They just find it very different from their character. Uh, so yeah, I think those are some of the things that really prevent us from reaching out and networking.
Oh my
Oh
God,
my God,
Suman,
so
that
that
makes
makes
so
so
much
much
sense,
sense.
right? Especially the part that you talked about where, one is the effortful that is definitely a problem, right? But the other part about, networking is give and take, right? So anyone who wants to network, should be ready to be able to give as much as they just receive from that network, right? And I
Absolutely.
think something that's very closely connected to this is that it's the wrong assumption that I have a very strong friend circle. I have a very strong professional network, right? So, for example, I go to the office and I see these same people day on day, and they
Right.
are my strong ties, right? And I have a very strong friend circle, again, strong ties.
Correct.
The fact that a lot of people say I have these many strong ties and I don't need another network, right? Because I don't have more of myself to give also. So I do want to kind of pick on, if you have the thoughts, the difference between strong tie networking and weak ties, and whether networking is more about strong ties or weak ties.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. Many of us feel strong ties are the most valuable, are, but yes, definitely they are valuable. But sometimes weaker ties can be as valuable, if not more valuable. So innovation, insights, they basically flow through these kind of weaker ties. It adds connectivity, it adds diversity. So the inner circle definitely is a strong circle. I mean, I can talk about my case, right? So when I was very much into this strong ties thing, but when I started Inroads leadership, I slowly realized the importance of the weaker ties. I have benefited the most from the outer circle. In fact, when I was thinking about it, I was just trying to recall how we got started. So, Divya, if you remember how we got started here on Mentza, I had connected with Vaishali long time back, right? Nothing happened at that time. And months passed. One day I got a call from her saying, "Hey, do you want to join something called Menza?" I said, "Really?" And that's how we got in. And now we have a channel going, right? So I think that's the power of networking. Absolutely.
Absolutely. 100%, right? Suman, and that brings me to the point we briefly touched upon, which is the reciprocal relationship that networking is, right?
Yes.
So for the give and take that we talked about, and listeners, any points about, what you think about networking? Is it all that it's hyped up to be? Is what we're chatting about? So any points that you have, feel free to type it into the chat, or, press the join speakers button and join us at any point that you feel comfortable. But yeah, Suman, going back to what we were saying about the reciprocal relationship and the give or take,
Yeah.
does that lead to a lot of people talking about it as wasting time, right? Because there is this thing that networking means wasting time because you are giving also, right? And you don't have the time. So can we, do you want to chat about?
Sure. Well, you know what? People who find it a waste of time, maybe they tried it and maybe they found it as a waste of time because maybe they were looking at what they were looking at is more like short-term networking, right? Where you're trying to approach something with a particular thing in mind and that thing didn't work, and that can be a bit manipulative, seen as manipulative by the other person. So I think networking needs to be, we need to take a long-term view of networking, and it's a balance really of quantity and quality, right? It's not some of this, what may have happened is they tried meeting the quote unquote right people and it didn't work. While important, meeting the right people is important, it's also about meeting a lot of people, because you don't know how it's eventually going to connect, right? I get reminded of the famous quote from Steve Jobs, right? He said, "You can never connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards." And sometimes, you can be talking to somebody who's from a completely different field, and you just get an insight, and it's like aha moment, right? Or maybe they connect you and they give you an idea. Hey, why didn't you try this, because it works in our field or in our industry. So yeah, I think it's again a perception. We need to take a more long-term view, and we also need to take a look at what we can offer as an effective networker, right? I mean, finally, it has to make sense to both parties. It has to be value add to both parties. I mean, I can talk about these podcasts itself, right? I mean, these podcasts we are making is about giving value to others, and we learn in the process, right? And interestingly, what happened is I've been doing this from this year, and I send them out to my network, and most often I don't hear back, right? And people are very busy, and sometimes I would wonder how effective these were. And this is something which happened this afternoon. I had gone to a client meeting, and it was a face-to-face meeting after a long time. I bumped into one of the leaders in the office. Yeah. And he walked up to me and he said, "You know what?" The first thing he said, "You know what? These podcasts are turning out so well." And he went on to tell me why he finds them so very useful. And I was completely speechless. And I thanked him. I said, "You know what? I didn't even know that you're listening to them." He said, "Yeah, yeah, I listen to them, and it's really helping. And I'm sharing it with my team as well." Right? So simple things like that. I think we just have to think of it as giving value to others as opposed to trying to get value. And as you said, the law of reciprocity, even eventually it kind of, when you start giving, I think we need to believe, and I personally believe that you finally get back a lot more.
I think that's sorry, Suman, this is echo. I think that's a brilliant point. And so nice to hear about the podcast, Suman. Love it. So I like what Simi's saying, right? And this is another point that I had wanted to bring up. Simi's talking about how networking events show you what's out there. And, Simi, hey, thanks for jumping in. Suman, one of the other things is that you get so comfortable with status quo and with just going through the motions every day that you never find out what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
You never go looking for what you don't know, and only when you do start networking you figure out how many perspectives, how much diversity, how much different things, more interesting, inspiring things are happening that's out there, right? So you'll never miss what you don't know, and that's one of the sad things about networking and why more people aren't effectively doing it, because they don't know what they don't know, basically. But yeah, Simi, thanks.
No, that's a great point. I mean, and I completely agree with you. And that's the reason why we need to also meet a lot of people. It's not just meeting the right people. It's also about meeting a lot of people, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And but at the end of the day, I still feel it's a lot to do with the mindset, right? So as long as I see it as an opportunity and not as an obligation, because what, people are now saying I need to network, so I go and network. But what happens is it's different, right? Because when we see it as an opportunity, when we see it, when you approach it with excitement, with curiosity, and an open mind, I think that's a big game changer. Otherwise, what, people also sense it. They know that you're out there to get something, and it just falls flat on its face.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, like, when I first started working for the government, it was really different for me, right? I come from private sector jobs, and I've probably had a couple of hundred different positions, but when I started as a software tester, I didn't know anything about anything, and I started entry level, and there were events that I came to know about a couple of years after, and it's something called Fed Talks. And so people from the industry come and they share different things about what they're working on, and there are vendors in the hallways with different products that they're offering to the government. And I didn't understand anything of most of what was going on. And I wasn't there really to network as in to try and get another job, but I just wanted to know what they're about. So to someone's point, it is about curiosity. If you keep an open mind, there's so much that you can learn. There were army generals there. There were, BlackBerry, that the company that almost was out of, commission. They were talking about things that they're doing for the government. We got to see George Takei, and he shared about, being in refugee camps and how he grew up as a Japanese person. We also, the most fascinating one thing I met, not met, but there was a talk by the guy that the movie Catch Me If You Can is based on. So he shared his story. So you just don't know what you might get inspired by, what you might come across, who you may meet sitting at the table next to you. So it is definitely about keeping an open mind and attending these events, even if you're nervous or you don't have anybody with you. So many things, right?
Completely agree, Simi. I think thanks for sharing that story. It is really about the curiosity to learn constantly. Like Radhika is also saying, yeah, there should be hunger to learn. I think that's foundational. Only then we should network. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
And Suman, on that note, right? What about this thing that the people that need it the most go out and network, right? And I'll come to what I mean by that is that it is inherently a bit selfish or self-centered, in the sense that if I am an insurance salesman and wrong profession, but if I'm an insurance salesman and I need to, meet more clients, maybe prospective, sometime in the future, they could turn out to be my clients, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, I need to meet more of them. And is there a tag associated with networking that makes it seen as selfish? So
Yeah, so I'll go back to what I was saying earlier, which is the short term versus long term view. I mean, even a good salesman knows that, they shouldn't be seen as a salesman, right? The moment the other side sees them as pushing something which they want to sell, as opposed to understanding what the customer wants and, delivering that, that's how we influence people, isn't it? So yeah, the short answer is, again, we need to take a long term view. One of the quotes which I really liked, and which kind of for me was a big shift in my mind, is that they say you don't dig a well when you're thirsty, right? And I think that kind of summarizes this entire networking thing. So make sure you dig your wells well in advance when you don't need something, and when you don't know, the right opportunities come, they come knocking at your door, or you can reach out for advice, whatever. At least those connections are made beforehand.
perfect. Kanika, you jumped in. Do you want to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I just wanted to give an example, a brilliant example of networking. As I completely agree with you on Suman. If you do networking for a selfish reason, then it's not going to stay like that. For me, I can
Exactly.
give a brilliant example. Narayan Madhavan sir, who had the channel also on Mentza and was one of the persons on Mentza. I met him when I was a journalist, and I met sir, and we spoke a couple of times. Then I connected with sir all the time. I stayed connected with sir all the time. I had stopped working as a journalist 10 years ago, but still I was connected with him, and he suggested Mentza to me. On one day, I just wished him on something, and he was like, "Hey, Kanika, you should join Mentza." And I was like, "Okay," and then I joined Mentza. Now, I never knew that he is the person who, after 10 years, would introduce me to a platform like this. But did that happen? Yes, that happened. And I was always in contact with him. Always, if like during COVID, I messaged him, "Sir, how are you doing? I know a couple of things." That's it. So I think if you want to network, have a genuine interest of learning from the person you are networking with, without being selfish, and stay connected for like longest time. Not only when you need, like someone was saying.
Absolutely, Kanika. I can't agree more. And you also bring in that the last thing which you mentioned is also very interesting. That it's we need to be at it. It's not like a one-off thing, right? I mean, just like any relationship, we need to work at it. uh, I think the same is true of networking, right? It's not just about going to an event and connecting with somebody. It's taking that extra effort to stay connected, share information. Only then, you can even consider that person as part of a network, as opposed to that person being part of your phone book.